girls out here about the bus. These fools out here afraid to bust.
It was just, I mean, you know, it was just
we do a Westside Connection show whenever I'm performing, Q performing, or we're together.
Westside Connection was not just a rapper. He was the architect who laid the foundation, the one who wrote the rules for the West Coast, a raging storm that once swept the Billboard charts in the United States. But then he suddenly vanished right when the future looked wide open. He did not disappear because of scandal, not because of prison time. Why would someone who once stood at the very top be erased by Hollywood rumors spread like wildfire? Blacklisted by Hollywood, caught in financial scandals and marked as a target? Or was he paying the price for a silent deal that was never meant to be spoken of? The truth behind it is more dangerous than any life sentence you have ever heard of. WC knew too much, especially the kind of truth Hollywood wants buried for good. Do not take your eyes off the screen because everything is about to be exposed right now. UC's real name is William LaShawn Calhoun Jr., born on February 3, 1970 in Houston, Texas. But Houston is only what appears on his birth certificate. The real WC was shaped somewhere else, South Central Los Angeles, a period when gang violence nearly controlled the entire city. Crips and Bloods divided neighborhoods block by block. Throughout the 1980s, drug trafficking and turf wars pushed gangs into endless conflict, turning South Central into a real battlefield where hundreds of murders occurred every year. That was the environment WC grew up in with no alternative path. He was raised in a working-class family. His parents worked relentlessly just to survive amid the chaos of the neighborhood. They had little time to know where their child was or what he was facing. And as supervision faded, WC was quickly pulled into the street life surrounding him. The Hundreds area was home to many different gangs, but the area where WC lived was primarily controlled by the Westside 11 neighborhood Crips. The 11s were a Crips subset and part of a larger alliance with other gangs in the Hundreds area to confront rivals. Here, survival was not about luck, but about knowing where you belonged and when to stay silent. Many future rappers also grew up in that same area, including Ice Cube. WC and Ice Cube were friends since elementary school. They shared many memories together, including arguments over football games. Cube once teased WC for being slow, but WC still scored a touchdown that drove Cube crazy. WC also shared that people often think Ice Cube is extremely aggressive in his music, but in real life, Cube is quite reserved, sarcastic, and sometimes hits people with words in a very sharp way. Despite South Central's reputation for danger, WC's childhood was not only about violence. He loved sports, especially football at Washington High School. At the same time, WC began developing an interest in music. During his high school years, he took part in rap battles with local rappers to build his name and make noise in the area. Around the same time, Ice Cube began gaining attention as part of the rap group NWA, quickly becoming a leading rapper and lyricist. Cube constantly pushed WC to seize opportunities and move faster, if he did not want to keep living like a mouse in a maze where crime and violence could bring you face to face with death at any moment. From a wandering kid to an empire builder. Watching Ice Cube's success, WC began taking rap more seriously. He teamed up with DJ Aladdin and formed the group Low Profile. In 1989, the album We're In This Together was released. It sold. The name gained momentum, but soon after the group fell apart due to management and contract issues. This detail is rarely examined, but it laid the groundwork for WC's entire future path. Low Profile did not collapse due to a lack of talent. It collapsed because of a bad contract. WC and the Mod Circle emerged from that context. On the surface, this was a West Coast rap group, including WC, Big G, Coolio, Sir Jinx, Chili Chill, and DJ Crazy Tunes. When Ice Cube left NWA and entered his solo phase with Priority Records, WC and Mod Circle were also signed, thanks to close personal ties. America's Most Wanted and Death Certificate placed Ice Cube at the center of the West Coast. WC was close to power, but not in the spotlight. He was not the media frontman. He was the one observing how power worked from very close range. Mod Circle's debut album in 1991 did not create a commercial explosion, but it was enough to put the group on tour with Ice Cube. WC was still connected to the streets, but he did not abandon music. It was not until 1995 that Mod Circle released their next album. By then, Coolio had broken out solo and achieved major success, though he still appeared on Mod Circle's final album alongside Mac 10 and Ice Cube. After the 1995 album, the group officially disbanded. UC later appeared in Ice Cube's film Friday as one of Big Worm's henchmen, then acted in the film Set It Off in 1996. That same year, WC joined Ice Cube and Mac 10 to form Westside Connection, an iconic collaboration between representatives of different areas and crews on the West Coast. Westside Connection's album was highly successful, but also deeply controversial. The single Bow Down was accused of dissing many other rappers, especially those from the East Coast. The group also became involved in conflict with Cypress Hill following a dispute between Ice Cube and Be Real. However, because WC had close relationships with both sides, he chose to stay out of the beef and tried to mediate, and it took many years for the conflict to truly end. Yet just as they were nearly reaching the peak, the biggest drama hit, ending the legendary supergroup after 2 platinum albums. Westside Connection. Breakup scandal. When Westside Connection is mentioned, collective memory almost always jumps straight to Bow Down to confrontation energy, to Ice Cube's cold authority and Mac 10's Sharp Street intensity. But between those two extremes, there is a figure whose role is rarely named correctly. That figure is WC. Not the loudest voice, not the one holding power or money, but the one who kept the structure from collapsing sooner. Westside Connection was never a group driven purely by emotion. It functioned like a triangle of power. Ice Cube represented rules, honor, and lines that could not be crossed. Mac 10 represented assets, cash flow, and ties to the market and the business world. WC stood in the hardest position. He was the glue, the one who understood both the language of principles and the language of interests, the one who knew when to speak to cool things down and when to stay silent to avoid an irreversible collision. The public saw the final product, but not the tense moments behind it. Recording sessions where the air was so heavy that one more sentence could make everything collapse. WC did not stand out in those moments because his role was not to impress, but to prevent conflict from happening. And the paradox lies here. History rarely remembers the ones who stop tragedies. It only remembers those who create them. The breaking point of Westside Connection did not start with a diss track or a public betrayal. It began outside of music. Around 2004 to 2005, Mac 10's divorce from Tion Watkins involved a massive financial settlement estimated at tens of millions of dollars. To the media, it was just a celebrity divorce. But in street code culture, it was seen as a sign of a shift. Mac 10 moved deeper into Hollywood, into real estate, into circles where money spoke louder than old principles. Suspicion began to form, not out of jealousy, but from the sense that one member of the group no longer stood on the same value ground. Everything crossed the line when family was pulled in. Ice Cube's wife intervened directly, and Mac 10's response was viewed as an insult to an untouchable boundary. In street culture, that is the moment when all bridges burn. There is no way back. The consequences came quickly. Mac 10 declared Westside Connection finished. Ice Cube completely cut off contact. 20 years later, the silence still stands as a confirmation. Ice Cube used only one word to describe it all: violation. No explanation. No details. Enough to close every possibility of reunion. In the middle of all this, WC chose the hardest path. He did not take sides in the war, but he did not deny the past. He continued touring alongside Ice Cube, staying in the role of a trusted companion. At the same time, he showed respect to Mac 10 by performing old songs at solo shows. WC's silence was not avoidance. It was adherence to street law. There are things that become more dangerous the clearer they are spoken. And the question still hangs in the air. When the glue goes silent, what really happened to a group built from egos that never accepted standing on equal ground? False rumors. There is a strange paradox surrounding WC. The cleaner he lives, the quieter he stays, the fewer legal traces he leaves behind, the busier the internet becomes writing his biography for him. Not with records, but with speculation. Not with evidence, but with collective imagination. In recent years, all it takes is typing WC's name into Reddit YouTube comments or gang culture forums, and a different picture immediately appears. no longer the quiet West Coast rapper. Instead, a shadow OG, someone rumored to stand behind Crip's influence, an invisible coordinator of the South LA rap scene, a man who does not need to appear, yet everyone knows he is there. These words have no official sources, no legal documents, no arrest records, yet they are repeated often enough to create the feeling that the truth must have existed somewhere at some point. What matters is that these rumors do not originate from any specific scandal. There was no night of arrest, no courtroom, no lawsuit. WC's record is nearly empty in the way mainstream media usually understands it, and that emptiness becomes fertile ground for the rumor machine to operate. The internet cannot tolerate blank space. When there are no facts to hold on to, it manufactures stories to fill the gap. And the way those stories are told is also unique. They do not carry a tone of takedown. No one tries to expose WC as a fallen figure. On the contrary, most rumors elevate him to another level. An untouchable OG. A man even the system cannot reach. A name that alone makes others cautious. Here, rumor is not a knife. It is a crown. There is an unspoken logic where street culture and internet culture intersect in WC. The less someone speaks, the less they appear. The less they explain, the easier it becomes to assign them the role of knowing everything, but saying nothing. Silence is not interpreted as a lack of information. It is interpreted as concealed power. And so from anonymous comments and unverified threads, WC is gradually constructed into a symbol more than a person. The irony is that WC has never fed these stories. He does not confirm them. He does not deny them. He does not react. He does not capitalize on them. He lets them pass the way someone does, who is used to letting the world speak on his behalf. And that very attitude only reinforces the myth. Because in the eyes of the crowd, only someone who truly has something to protect chooses silence for that long. At this point, rumor is no longer a question of right or wrong. It becomes a cultural phenomenon. It reveals how the public treats figures who refuse to perform their private lives. When there is no scandal to consume, the audience produces scandal in the form of mythology, not to destroy, but to worship. But the final question still hangs in the air. When legends are built from silence and speculation, how long can they live longer than the truth before they begin to obscure the real person standing behind them? The death that changed everything. There are deaths that make headlines explode. There are deaths that trigger investigations, lawsuits, conspiracy theories, and sensational titles running for weeks. But there are also deaths that create no headlines at all. No scandal, no cameras, no one chasing the story. And those are the most dangerous deaths of all, because they break a person from the inside in silence. For WC, the death of DJ Crazy Tunes belongs to the third kind. Crazy Tunes was not only his older brother, he was not just a DJ behind the turntables, or a familiar producer within the West Coast ecosystem. To WC, Crazy Tunes was the timekeeper, the one who corrected things when they began to drift out of sync, the one standing behind so WC could stand in front without worrying that the stage might collapse at any moment. In hip-hop, the public usually remembers the rap voice, the image under the lights. But real OGs understand that some careers are not built by words, but held together by rhythm. The rhythm of discipline, the rhythm of consistency, the rhythm of knowing when to push forward and when to stop. And Crazy Tunes was that rhythm in WC's life. The death of Crazy Tunes did not lead to any criminal investigation. No suspicions, no retaliatory bloodshed. Official records list natural causes. Everything closed very quickly. Too quickly for someone who had lived his entire life relying on the quiet presence of his brother. That was the most dangerous part. Because when there is no scandal, the public has no reason to stay. The news moves on. Timelines keep updating. A West Coast OG loses the most important person in his life, but the world does not stop. No one demands the next chapter. No one waits for an explanation. And WC says nothing. There is no tearful interview run. No emotional stories edited for television. No album packaged and marketed as a tribute project following industry formulas. WC does what he was trained to do from a very young age. He withdraws inward. He stays silent. He mourns in the way of someone who does not believe in exposing pain to the public. From the outside, questions begin to surface. Where is WC? Why is he not appearing? Why does he not have the same energy as before? Some call it a disappearance. Others are more blunt. They say he is finished, that WC's time passed with the old generation. But the truth is simpler and colder. WC did not disappear. He only lost the one who kept the rhythm behind him. When Crazy Tunes was alive, WC had an invisible anchor. Someone who understood him before he spoke. Someone who knew when to push and when to pull back. Someone who reminded him that no matter how loud the outside world became, discipline had to remain inside. No panic, no overreaction, no letting emotion take the lead. When that anchor disappeared, WC did not collapse in the way entertainment stories often expect. There was no self-destruction arc, no personal scandal, no public downward spiral, only a slow retreat, a deliberate deceleration, a different way of existing. And that is why the public did not notice what had just happened. Because we are used to tragedies that make noise. We are used to pain coming with images. We are used to loss being performed to be recognized. We are not taught how to recognize someone who is mourning in silence. For WC, mourning does not mean stopping life. It means changing the way of existing. He no longer appears on the front line as often. He no longer needs to prove his presence to the crowd. He moves into roles few people notice. Behind the scenes. Advisor, detail corrector, discipline reminder. The one who makes sure things do not drift off axis. That is not a step backward. It is a form of maturity forced by loss. There is a perspective very few people say out loud. In the world of West Coast OGs, losing the one who keeps the rhythm behind you is far more dangerous than losing the spotlight. The spotlight can be found again. The spotlight can be created through campaigns, media events. But rhythm cannot. Rhythm is built through time, through shared memory, through thousands of moments no one ever records, through silent corrections no one ever sees. Crazy Tunes carried all of that memory. When he passed, WC did not just lose a brother. He lost a piece of the past that no one else could replace. And that is exactly why he could not keep appearing the same way and pretend everything was fine. He could not stand under the lights and speak empty words while everything inside had fundamentally changed. The question is not why WC stayed silent. The question is, when an OG loses the one who kept the rhythm behind him, what does he have left to step back into the light? What just happened? The life nobody noticed. There was no press release, no farewell concert, no "I'm retiring" moment for headlines to grab. For WC, what just happened was not a fall. It was a deliberate step back. And because that step back was so quiet, almost no one noticed. In the memory of most audiences, WC is locked to a phase: low profile, Mad Circle, Westside Connection, bow down. Then everything fades. No scandal, no controversy, no personal shock. And so people default to a simple conclusion. WC disappeared. WC fell off. WC stepped away. But the real question should be, what just happened? What happened when the lights went out and no one heard a sound? The truth is, WC never left hip-hop. He just changed where he stood. From in front of the microphone to behind it. From the speaker to the keeper of rhythm. From a recognizable face to part of a structure the audience does not see. At this stage of his life, WC does not need another album to prove who he is. He does not need constant stage appearances to remind people he is still here. WC stepped into a different role. Quieter, but far more demanding. The role of making sure the West Coast essence does not get distorted when it moves beyond music. Few people know that WC has worked behind the scenes as a dialect coach and cultural consultant for television projects. His job is not to write rap lyrics. It is to adjust every speaking rhythm, every stress, every pause in dialogue so a character sounds like someone truly born out of South Central Los Angeles. Not a Hollywood version, not a shallow imitation, but the voice of someone who lived in that space. This kind of work has no spotlight, no major credits, no red carpet, but it requires something not every rapper has: cultural credibility. When a production brings in WC, they are not hiring an artist for decoration. They are hiring a witness, someone qualified to say, "People don't talk like that here," or "No one from that block would ever use that word." WC works behind the scenes, not because he needs money or recognition, but because it is the only way to make sure the West Coast story is not told wrong. He understands one thing very clearly. When hip-hop enters film and television, the first thing lost is not the beat or the flow. It is lived truth. And if no one stands behind the scenes correcting small details, an entire generation will grow up with a distorted version of street culture. What matters is WC never promotes these roles. He does not post about the work. He does not explain it in long interviews. He does not turn the backstage into a personal brand. To him, doing the job right matters more than being known. And that attitude is exactly why the public assumes he fully stepped away. What just happened? What happened is WC stepped out of the light while everyone was still staring at the stage. And when the audience's eyes are always drawn to the loudest place, quiet movement behind the scenes is easily ignored. In hip-hop, we are used to a very narrow definition of success. How many albums sold? How big the tours were? How many headlines carried the name? When those numbers drop, people call it failure. But for WC, success was never just about being seen. His success is about still being trusted. When a young rapper needs to learn how to speak in the right neighborhood tone. When an actor needs to understand that silence can be more dangerous than words. When a project needs someone to make sure the story is not betrayed. They go to WC. This is not disappearance. This is a different form of existence. Less noisy, but more durable. Less flashy, but far deeper. WC no longer stands where people applaud. He stands where without him everything would sound wrong, look wrong, and feel fake. There is a major paradox here. WC is seen as an untouchable OG. But because he no longer touches the spotlight, people assume he is no longer in the game. The truth is, he is still there. He just does not play by the rules of attention. In a culture increasingly driven by who speaks the loudest and who appears the most, WC chose the opposite path. He believes in the value of not being consumed, not being worn down by the content cycle, not being forced to speak in order to exist. And that is why the question, how do people not know, becomes bitter. Not because WC hides, but because we have been trained to only recognize what is lit up. WC did not disappear. He simply refused to stand where it is easiest to see. He chose to stand where there is more responsibility. Few notice, but those who need to know very well. And the final question still hangs. If success is no longer the lights, no longer applause, no longer being named every week, then what is real success? Maybe for WC, success is leaving the stage without announcement and still leaving an impact even when no one is watching. How do people not know? The untouchable OG. People often remember hip-hop through the loudest names. OGs who step in front of the camera speak bluntly, curse openly, and expose their private lives as part of a survival strategy. But WC does not belong to that group. And that is exactly what triggers the final question. That sounds irrational, but is deeply real. How do people not know? The answer lies here. WC has no scandal. Not because he is lucky, but because he does not play by the rules of scandal. He does not compete for attention. No live stream arguments, no backstage stories traded for views, no turning conflict into content. While many other OGs choose to exist by constantly being seen, WC chose the opposite. He exists by not exposing himself. Put WC next to the loud OGs of the West Coast, and the difference is clear. On one side are those who treat media as a second battlefield, where every statement is a strike. On the other side is WC, who almost never tells his own story. He does not need to prove who he is. He does not need to polish his image. He does not need the audience to believe or understand. The only thing he protects is the boundary between life and music, the boundary between street code and media, the boundary between what should be said and what should never be said. That discipline turns WC into a paradox in an era where presence is measured by volume. He is still there, still named, still respected, yet leaves no clear trail for media to grab onto. And when there is no official information, something else immediately appears to fill the gap: rumor. Rumors are not born from truth, they are born from silence. When someone is too private, the community writes the story for them. With WC, rumor is not meant to tear him down. It exists to explain a question the public cannot answer. Why is someone with such a clean profile still seen as untouchable? From there, myth forms, word of mouth, online speculation, whispers that are never confirmed. Not because there is proof, but because there is nothing to deny. WC understands this, and he accepts it. He does not rush to explain. He does not correct. He does not push back. Because for a real OG, reacting can be more dangerous than silence. In the street world, some things become weaker the more you explain them. WC chooses to stand still. Let rumors come and go on their own. Whoever believes, believes. Whoever doubts, doubts. His existence does not depend on being understood correctly. That is why the question, "How do people not know?" sounds like a complaint aimed at the audience, but is actually a question directed at WC himself. Why do people not know? Because he never wanted them to. WC does not build an image to be decoded. He does not place himself in a position that needs retelling. In an industry where everyone tries to turn their life into a story, WC refuses to be the main character of his own. This leads many to misunderstand. They think no scandal means nothing to say. In reality, it is the opposite. No scandal is a choice far harder than chasing attention. It requires self-control. It requires enduring being misunderstood without responding. It requires accepting that history may overlook you. WC accepted that very early. He does not need annual praise. He does not need his name in every OG debate. He only needs to keep his position in places where there are no cameras. And that is exactly why he has lasted longer than many others. Not pulled into the self-destructive spiral of fame. Not forced to keep talking when there is nothing left to say. Looking back, people realize WC's silence was not avoidance. It was power. The power of someone who does not need to prove anything. The power of understanding that the fewer traces you leave, the harder you are to control. In a world where everyone needs to be seen, WC proves the opposite. Some people become more untouchable the less they are seen. And that is why even now, looking back at the entire journey, the question still holds weight. How do people not know? Not because they do not care, not because WC was not big enough, but because he deliberately stepped outside the game of exposure. He chose silence as a protective barrier. And in hip-hop, where fame often comes with damage that may be the final form of power. In a world where everyone needs to be seen, is silence the final form of power?
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.